The morning Ethan Whitaker threw the eviction notice across the conference table, he was wearing a suit that cost more than the 3-month severance his father had just declined. The paper landed face up, black ink spelling out 30 days to vacate. And Miles Whitaker, 68 years old, hands still rough from 43 years of warehouse work, picked it up without a word. His son leaned back in the leather chair, arms crossed, and smiled the kind of smile that said he'd been rehearsing this moment for months. "You had your chance to retire with dignity, Dad. Now you're just in the way." Miles folded the notice in half, slid it into the pocket of his work jacket, and walked out of the building he'd helped construct back when Ethan was still in elementary school. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just left. Because some battles aren't fought with words, they're fought with patience. And Miles Whitaker had been patient for 22 years, living like a man with nothing while sitting on investments worth $4.3 million. Before we continue, remember that this is still a small channel, and I could really use your support. Please like the video and subscribe. It's free and it helps more than you know. Miles started at Cascade Freight Systems in Portland, Oregon, when he was 25 years old. 6 months after his wife Lauren died giving birth to their son. The grief nearly killed him, but he had a child who needed food, clothes, a roof, and a father who didn't fall apart. So Miles worked, swing shift, graveyard, double shifts on holidays, whatever kept the rent paid and the lights on. But Miles did something most people in his position never thought to do. He educated himself. Not with college classes he couldn't afford, but with books from the library, personal finance, investment strategies, market history. He read everything he could find about how money worked, how wealth was actually built, not through salary, but through compounding returns and disciplined saving. At 27, Miles opened a brokerage account with $200. His co-workers laughed when they found out. "Man, you're gonna lose that in a week. Stock market's for rich people." "Rich people started somewhere," Miles said, "and most of them started exactly where I am." That $200 became $600 within 18 months. Miles didn't touch it. He added to it. $20 here, $50 there, whenever he could scrape together anything beyond the bare necessities. He lived in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew. He drove a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. He wore the same 3 shirts until they had holes, but his portfolio grew. Ethan was 8 when he started asking questions. "Dad, how come we don't have an Xbox? Tyler's family has 2. "Because we're saving money for things that matter, son." "Like what?" "Like your future, like making sure you have opportunities I didn't have." Ethan didn't understand then. Miles hoped he would eventually. By the time Ethan was 13, Miles had over $80,000 invested. The returns were compounding. He was learning which sectors to watch, which companies had real fundamentals versus hype. He never chased trends. He bought quality, held long-term, reinvested dividends, and lived off less than half his warehouse salary. But he never told Ethan about the money. He wanted his son to learn discipline, to understand the value of work, to develop character before he ever saw wealth. So Miles kept living like a man on the edge of poverty while his net worth climbed past 6 figures. Ethan got into Oregon State on a partial scholarship. Miles had already set aside funds to cover the rest. But he didn't tell Ethan that. Instead, he worked overtime, came home exhausted, let his son believe every tuition check represented blood and sweat. "Dad, you don't have to work this hard. I can get loans." "You're not starting your life in debt, Ethan. I've got it handled." "But you're killing yourself. I'm doing what fathers do." What Miles didn't say was that the overtime was optional. The tuition came from dividend income. But he wanted Ethan to see sacrifice, to feel the weight of what an education cost, to graduate with gratitude instead of entitlement. Ethan graduated with a degree in business administration. Miles was in the audience, wearing a thrift store sport coat, beaming with pride. Ethan walked across that stage, shook hands with the dean, and looked out into the crowd. When he saw his father, Miles waved. Ethan looked away. That was the first cut. 6 months later, Ethan got hired at a logistics firm in Seattle. Good salary, benefits, corner office within 2 years. He bought a condo in Capitol Hill, started wearing designer watches, drove a BMW leased at $600 a month. Miles was proud. His son had made it. But something had shifted in Ethan. The gratitude Miles expected never came. Instead, there was distance. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rare. "Dad, I can't make it home for Thanksgiving. Big project at work." "That's okay, son. Christmas then?" "We'll see." Christmas came and went. Ethan didn't show. Miles kept working at the warehouse even though by then he had over $900,000 invested. He could have retired at 55, could have traveled, relaxed, enjoyed the fruits of decades of discipline. But work gave him structure, gave him purpose, and deep down he was waiting to see what kind of man his son would become. At 62, Miles hit $1 million in net worth. He celebrated alone in his apartment with a cup of instant coffee and a grocery store cupcake. He thought about calling Ethan, sharing the news, but he didn't, because he knew Ethan wouldn't understand the significance, wouldn't understand that a warehouse worker with a high school diploma had just accomplished what most people spend their lives chasing. Ethan was 35 when he got promoted to Regional Operations Director. His salary broke 6 figures. His ego broke reasonable limits. He started posting on social media about hustle culture, about grinding, about success. Never mentioned his father, never mentioned the man who worked double shifts to put him through college debt-free. Miles saw the posts, didn't comment, just watched his son drift further into a world where image mattered more than substance. Then Cascade Freight Systems got acquired. New ownership, new management, restructuring. Ethan was brought in as a consultant. Within 3 months, he was offered a VP position. He took it, and his first major decision was workforce reduction. Miles was 68, still showing up every day, still doing the job he'd done for over 4 decades. His body ached, his knees were shot. But he showed up because that's what he did. Ethan called him into the conference room on a Tuesday morning. Miles thought it was about retirement benefits, maybe a recognition ceremony for his years of service. Instead, Ethan handed him termination papers. "We're eliminating your position. Automation's more cost-effective." Miles looked at his son, looked at the papers, looked back at his son. "You're firing me? I'm making a business decision. Don't take it personally. You're my son, and you're an employee. This is how the world works, Dad. Adapt or get left behind." Miles felt something crack inside him, not his heart, his hope. "I see. When do I need to be out?" "End of the week. We'll mail your final check." Miles stood up, pushed the chair back in, and turned to leave. "Dad, wait! You understand, right? This isn't about you. It's about efficiency, margins, the future of the company." Miles stopped at the door, didn't turn around. "I understand perfectly, Ethan. I understand exactly who you've become." He walked out, cleaned out his locker, drove home in his 20-year-old truck, and sat in his apartment for the first time in 4 decades without a job to go to the next morning. That night, Miles made a phone call to an estate attorney in Portland named Vincent Park, a man he'd met years ago at a financial literacy workshop. "Vincent, I need to set up something specific, very specific." "I'm listening." Over the next 3 hours, Miles outlined his plan. Ethan thrived in his new position, cut costs, increased margins, impressed the board, bought a house in the suburbs, upgraded to a Tesla, got engaged to a marketing executive named Brianna, who wore heels that cost more than Miles used to make in a week. Brianna never met Miles. Ethan made excuses every time she asked. "My dad's pretty busy with his retirement stuff. He's not really comfortable in social settings." "But I'd love to meet him. He raised you. He must be amazing." He's complicated. Let's just focus on us." Translation. Ethan was ashamed of the studio apartment, ashamed of the thrift store clothes, ashamed that his father was a warehouse worker instead of someone impressive. 3 years passed. Miles lived quietly, spending less than $30,000 a year while his investments grew past $4 million. He volunteered at a food bank, tutored adults in financial literacy at the community center, helped single parents set up their first retirement accounts. "Mr. Whitaker, you really know this stuff. Did you work in finance?" "No, I worked in a warehouse, but I studied finance every night for 40 years. He never mentioned the money, never mentioned that he had more in his portfolio than most of the people he was helping would see in their lifetimes. Then, at 71, Miles had a stroke. Moderate, enough to land him in the hospital for a week. Enough that the hospital called his emergency contact. Ethan showed up on day 4. Not because he wanted to, but because his assistant told him it would look bad if he didn't. He walked into the hospital room, saw his father in the bed, pale and thin, IV in his arm. "Hey, Dad, how you feeling?" "I've been better. Thanks for coming." "Yeah, well, work's been crazy. Didn't get the message right away." Miles nodded, didn't say anything, just looked at his son like he was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. "So, the doctors say you'll be okay? That's good. You had me worried there for a second." "I'm sure. Listen, I talked to them about the bills. Don't worry about it. I'll cover what insurance doesn't. Consider it taken care of." Miles almost laughed. Almost told him right then that the hospital bill was a rounding error compared to what he had in the bank. But he stayed quiet. "Thanks, Ethan." "Sure, Dad. That's what family's for, right?" Ethan stayed for 20 minutes, spent most of it checking his phone. Then he left, didn't visit again. 2 weeks after Miles was discharged, Vincent Park came to his apartment. "You sure about this, Miles? Once it's done, it's done." "I'm sure. More sure than I've ever been about anything." They sat at Miles's small kitchen table, went through every document, every clause, every condition. "This is, hands down, the most specific trust I've ever drafted," Vincent said. "But if this is what you want, I'll make sure it's airtight. It's what I want. My son needs to learn what I failed to teach him. And if I can't teach him while I'm alive, maybe I can teach him after I'm gone." Miles died 8 months later. Heart failure, quiet, alone in his apartment. The neighbors found him 2 days after. It made the local news for about 5 minutes. The funeral was small. Ethan showed up in a black suit, sunglasses on, looking appropriately somber for appearances. Brianna held his arm. They left immediately after. 1 week later, Ethan received a letter from Vincent Park's office, request for him to attend the reading of Miles Whitaker's will. Ethan almost didn't go. He figured his dad had maybe $20,000 in savings, some old furniture, nothing worth the drive to Portland. But Brianna convinced him. "Babe, you should go. It's respectful. And who knows, maybe he had life insurance or something." Ethan sat in Vincent's office, bored, checking his phone, while Vincent went through the preliminaries. "Mr. Whitaker, your father left behind an estate valued at approximately $4.8 million. Ethan dropped his phone. "I'm sorry, what?" $4.8 million. Investment accounts, mutual funds, individual stocks, treasury bonds, all carefully managed over the course of 46 years. Ethan's mouth went dry. His father, the warehouse worker, the man who lived in a studio apartment and drove a truck held together with rust, had nearly $5 million. That's impossible." Vincent slid a folder across the desk. Statements, transaction histories, decades of disciplined investing, every detail documented. Ethan flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. This couldn't be real. His father was poor. He'd always been poor. "There's more," Vincent said. "Your father left specific instructions regarding the distribution of his estate." Ethan looked up, hope flooding through him. This was it. All those years of distance, of embarrassment. They didn't matter now. His father had left him a fortune. The estate is divided as follows: $1.2 million to the Portland Community Financial Literacy Center to fund free investment education for low-income families in perpetuity. $1.2 million split equally among the 4 employees at Cascade Freight Systems who worked alongside your father for over 20 years. $1 million to Vincent Park to administer the trust and ensure compliance with your father's wishes. And the remaining $1.4 million is designated for you, with conditions. Conditions? Vincent pulled out another document. You'll receive $300 per month for the next 20 years. That's $72,000 total. The remainder stays invested. If, at the end of 20 years, you demonstrate to the satisfaction of an independent board that you've developed the character, humility, and financial discipline your father tried to teach you, you receive the full balance, which by then should exceed $3 million. If you don't meet the criteria, the remaining funds go to charity. Ethan's face went white, then red. $300 a month? That's insane. I'm his son. I'm his only child. You're also the man who fired him, who refused to introduce him to your fiancé, who visited him once during his hospitalization and left after 20 minutes. Your father documented everything, Mr. Whitaker. Every missed call, every broken promise, every lie you told about who he was. This is punishment. No, it's education. Ethan stood up, shaking with rage. I'll contest this. No court will uphold this. It's cruel. It's legal. Your father worked with 3 different attorneys to ensure it would survive any challenge, and he included a clause. If you contest the will, you forfeit everything. The $300 a month stops immediately, and the entire estate goes to charity. Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath him. He'd been counting on that money. His mortgage was underwater. His car lease was killing him. He had credit card debt he'd been hiding from Brianna. He needed that money. Why would he do this to me? Vincent leaned back in his chair. He left you a letter. Would you like to read it? Ethan snatched the envelope from Vincent's hand, tore it open. Son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably angry. You're probably calling me cruel, unfair, vindictive. But I want you to understand something. I'm not punishing you. I'm giving you one last chance to become the man I always hoped you'd be. I had $4.8 million. I could have lived in comfort, could have retired at 50, could have given you everything you wanted, but I didn't. Because giving you everything would have ruined you. And I loved you too much to do that. I watched you become someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued appearance over character, someone who was ashamed of where he came from, someone who fired his own father to impress a boardroom full of strangers. You're getting $300 a month because that's what I lived on while I was raising you and building the fortune you thought didn't exist. If I could build wealth on that, so can you. Sell the house you can't afford. Trade the car that's bleeding you dry. Stop trying to impress people who don't actually care about you. Learn to live within your means. Learn humility. Learn that your worth isn't determined by your salary or your zip code. Learn what I tried to teach you your entire life. In 20 years, if you've learned those lessons, you'll have more money than you ever dreamed of. But more importantly, you'll have something money can't buy. Peace. I forgive you for everything, Ethan. I forgive you for the distance, the shame, the rejection, but I won't enable you. This is my last act as your father, teaching you the hardest lesson. I love you. I always have. And I hope 20 years from now, you'll understand why I did this. Dad Ethan read the letter 3 times, then crumpled it in his fist. The next 6 months were brutal. Ethan couldn't maintain his lifestyle on $300 a month plus his salary. The mortgage devoured his paycheck. The car lease crushed him. Brianna started asking questions. Where's all the money going? It's complicated. Work stuff. Your dad was rich, Ethan. Why can't we access that money? It's in a trust. It's tied up. For how long? 20 years. Brianna looked at him like he'd just told her the sky was green. 20 years. It's what he wanted. She left him 3 weeks later. Took her stuff, took the ring, took the last shred of his pride. Ethan sold the house at a loss, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Gresham, returned the Tesla, bought a used Honda, cut up his credit cards, and for the first time in a decade, he stopped pretending. He started reading the books his father used to read: personal finance, investment strategy. He opened a brokerage account, started putting aside 30% of every paycheck, just like his dad had. He volunteered at the same community center where Miles had taught classes. One of the students recognized him. "Hey, you're Miles's son. He talked about you all the time, said you were going to do great things." Ethan's throat tightened. "He said that?" "Every class. He was so proud of you." Ethan went home that night and cried for the first time since his father's funeral. Years passed. Ethan rebuilt his life slowly. He got promoted, not through politics, but through competence. He saved aggressively. He lived modestly. He helped other people with their finances the way his father had. At 45, he met someone, a teacher named Claire who drove a 10-year-old Subaru and lived in a house she'd bought with cash saved over 15 years. Someone who valued the same things his father had valued. They got married at the courthouse. No expensive wedding, no debt, just two people who understood that wealth wasn't about appearances. On his 50th birthday, Ethan received a letter from Vincent Park. "The board has reviewed your case. We've interviewed your colleagues, your neighbors, your financial advisor. We've examined your savings patterns, your charitable giving, your lifestyle choices. The unanimous decision is that you've met the criteria your father established. Attached are the documents transferring the remaining trust balance to your name. As of today, it's valued at $3.4 million. Your father would be proud." Ethan sat in his modest living room, holding the letter, and felt nothing but regret. Not for the money he'd waited for, but for the years he'd wasted, the time he'd lost, the father he'd rejected. He drove to the cemetery that afternoon, sat by the grave, and talked. "Hey, Dad, it's been 20 years. I finally get it. Everything you were trying to teach me. And I'm sorry it took me this long. Sorry I didn't see it while you were alive. Sorry I was ashamed of you when I should have been learning from you." The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance a crow called. "I'm using the money the way you would have wanted. Foundation for financial education. Scholarships for kids whose parents work warehouse jobs. I'm teaching your classes now, Dad. Teaching people what you taught me, even though I fought it every step of the way." Ethan wiped his eyes. "I hope wherever you are, you know I finally understand. That real wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in who you are when nobody's watching. It's in the lives you touch. It's in the legacy you leave behind." He stood up, brushed the grass from his jeans. "I love you, Dad. And I'm sorry I never said it enough when you could hear it. Today, Ethan is 58. He lives in the same modest house, drives a car he paid cash for, wears clothes that last, and every Saturday he teaches free financial literacy classes at the same community center where his father taught. On the wall behind him, a framed photo. Miles Whitaker wearing his warehouse uniform, grinning at the camera. Underneath, a plaque. Miles Whitaker taught that wealth without character is just noise. Character without pretense is legacy.